Great. Thank you, Roshni. Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for choosing to be with us. I'm Brenda Lammy, Vice President of Professional Leadership Development at the college. To begin, we respectfully acknowledge that we're broadcasting today from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin-Anishinaabe peoples. We're also pleased to be joined today by people from coast to coast to coast who, like us, live, work, and play on lands that have been inhabited by First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples and call this nation home. I would also like to acknowledge the Indigenous culture of knowledge sharing that leverages collective experience and allows people to learn from one another, providing an opportunity for personal and collective capacity to develop and advance. I believe we have a lot to learn about intergenerational and traditional knowledge sharing and hope that it is in that spirit of sharing and learning that you join us today. I invite all attendees to reflect on the territories you are participating from as we commit ourselves to gaining knowledge, forging a new, culturally safe relationship, and contributing to reconciliation. This webinar will include reference to the mass and unmarked graves being discovered across the country, which participants may find triggering. For support, you can call the National Indian Residential School Crisis Line, which Amy will be posting the number in the chat box. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's moderator, Heather Thiessen. Heather is the patient partner at Health Standards Organization and Accreditation Canada. Heather is an experienced patient partner with over a decade of experience serving on numerous committees and working groups at the local, regional, provincial, and national levels. I invite you to read more about Heather's patient experience and contributions to the health system on the event page. Heather, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Brenda, and welcome. And thank you everyone for joining us for our third webinar in the series entitled How You Can Contribute to Reconciliation. So part 3 is about Meet Me Where I Am, applying people-centered care to engage with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So today, I am Heather Thiessen. So I am that patient partner lead at Accreditation Canada and Health Standards Organization. I am so honored to be filling in for Ali, who did the previous 2 webinars. She's on a well-deserved maternity leave. So I thank you again for joining us today for an amazing hour of learning. So I'd like to invite Mary Lee to open our circle. Mary Lee?
Thank you very much, Heather. Chimigwech, thank you to the ancestors for bringing us here today. May we open our mind, our hearts, and our ears to hearing, seeing, and speaking with one another as we discuss the important issues that are near and dear to all of us. At the same time, Creator, I ask that you look upon all the people in the community whom don't have a voice, whom need protection, and need your strength and guidance in some difficult times. I ask you to look after our old ones and our young ones, and those who have not yet made their presence known to us. I ask all of these in your favor. Miigwech. Thank you very much. With that in mind, back to Heather.
Thank you, Mary Lee. So, you know, as part of getting to know one another, I think we'll start with a bit of introduction. So I am Heather. So I am a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm a woman living with 2 chronic neurological conditions. I come from an English and Swedish background, and I acknowledge the beautiful land of which I am on today. I am on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis. For the past 13 years, I have used my lived experiences of being a patient within a healthcare system to help see what is possible and help to create environments to enable authentic engagement. And I love to help people learn how to partner and learn. I'm also on a learning journey about our Indigenous cultures, to learn about the calls to action. So that's why these previous 2 webinars were so important. And so I would ask that if you haven't seen the webinars, to go back and reflect upon them and explore ways today about how we can authentically partner with our First Nations, Inuit and Métis partners. So it's my pleasure to invite Kimberly and Marilee to introduce themselves yet again and share a little bit about themselves and why they're here today. So I'll pass it to you, Kimberly.
Great, thanks, Heather, and welcome everyone. My name is Kimberly Fairman. I am a daughter and a sister, a mother and a grandmother and a wife. I work at the Institute for Circumpolar Health Research in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, which is the traditional territory of the Yellowknife's Dene First Nation and the North Slave Métis. I am Nunavut Mute. I've lived most of my life here in Yellowknife, going to school and learning and growing with my friends and colleagues here in the Northwest Territories. I'm really happy to be here for this third and final webinar. It's been an amazing experience working with this group, working with Heather and Ali previously, and also with Marilee. I just want to extend my thanks to all of you for just bringing me along on this journey and helping me with all the learning. And so I'm really looking forward to the discussion today, and hopefully we have an engaging and good hour together.
Thank you, Kimberly. Marilee, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks so much. Kimberly, as always, it is so good to see you, my friend, and I'm glad that you're doing well. And yes, while this is the third webinar, and as we move on, I know that we will always remain connected. Good afternoon, everyone. Marilee Nalgijik. I'm originally from Fort William First Nation. I am Ojibwe and Inigo clan. I am currently residing in the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I am the Chief Executive Officer for Canadian Indigenous Nurses Association. I have been working in the Indigenous health area for over 25 years, but have held other portfolios in business, marketing, IT, education, you name it, I probably did it. With that in mind, I'm so glad that we're here to bring forward some of the discussion that's very necessary in being able to address and understand the issues that are current and of concern to a lot of you whom are working with our Indigenous partners, organizations, or allies. Indigenous health is one that is been recognized very widely within the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. It's been widely recognized in the media lately, and it is one that we at the Indigenous nurses are gearing up to be involved in as we address the changes that will come in addressing Indigenous health, especially within the Indigenous nursing knowledge profession, and like in the speech from the throne, the Indigenous ways of knowing. We look forward to the Western approach that certifies the professional credentials of our members, but also how we might be able to blend those in the traditional approaches of our people. I am glad to be here on behalf of the nurses whom are First Nations, Inuit and Métis from coast to coast to coast. I thank you for this opportunity, and I thank you for the coordinators of this webinar for inviting me to this very rich dialogue. Miigwech.
Thank you, Marilee. So today is really about meeting people where they're at and builds on the previous webinars over the last year. So let's do a little bit of recalling from the previous webinars. So the first webinar was learning the how and why of meaningful engagement, and it invited attendees to acknowledge the land on which they are on. The second webinar built on this to look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's 7 health-related calls to actions, numbers 18 to 24, and how to move these forwards. So today, we will continue to move forward and have a conversation about how to meet people where they're at and to move forward up the hill in a positive way. We will explore how the foundations of people-centered care can be applied in an Indigenous context with a commitment to action to help you figure out how to climb the hill and move forward. I do invite all that are here today to become engaged and ask questions and share thoughts throughout the webinar. This is a conversation. We will be checking the chat box and really hope that you will interact. Now is the time to ask those questions. You may have and know that this is a safe environment to do so. So with that, I'd like to do a little bit of pre-work here and talk about what is people-centered care. And I have the definition in front of me, and the definition that Accreditation Canada and Health Standards Organization, we follow with our standards, that people-centered care is an approach to care that is consciously adopts the individual, cares, families, communities, perspectives as participants in and beneficiaries of trusted health systems that are organized around the comprehensive needs of people. Now, if I also think about the term engagement, what does engagement mean? So I have that definition as well here. So engagement is the involvement of people in decision-making and active participation in a range of activities, maybe planning, evaluation, care, research, training, or recruitment, where people are valued for their unique experiences and support to work in a collaboration with others. So with that, let's think about how we're going to start this conversation today. So as we have been following the seasons with our webinar series, I would like to start by inviting Mary Lee to start with spring and what spring means with the Indigenous cultures. Mary Lee?
Thanks a lot, Heather. Oh, move my microphone. Thanks a lot, Heather. So what I'd like to be able to go back to with the registrants whom are here with us today, and if we could just get a sense of where you're coming from in the country as part of being the participants here today, just give me a little bit of a land acknowledgement as to where you're coming from. What treaty area are you in? What Métis settlement are you close to? If you're near an Inuit population, do you know where their land claim settlement is in process? One of the things that we've done here as part of these webinar series is we started out last summer. Not the best place to start, but at least we started somewhere. And when we started there, we were looking at summer in the very robust nature of why we did this, what we were doing at that time. And it was unique because we were also in a pandemic situation where a lot of our peoples, unfortunately, were restricted to personal ceremony, where they might be able to otherwise engage in powwow, community gatherings. All of those were so limited. Then we went into the part 2 webinar series, which was looking at harvesting. And when we were developing it, what were we harvesting? What were we trying to do? What was the purpose of the harvest? And part of all of that information was in alignment with what we were having in front of us. We had legislation, we had the calls to action, we had all of these things. Where the webinars should have started is where we're at right now, spring. Spring is a time of newness, the newness of animals, babies, the flowers, the foliage that surrounds us, to looking at the opening of our community gatherings, our powwow season, the rite of spring, and welcoming all of those treasures that the Creator has given to us as we prepare again for the summer months. Fortunately, we were able to do this right at the cusp of between spring and summer. In the spring, it also starts for us the Eastern Door. The Eastern Door welcomes the cyclical nature of Indigenous culture, the entry gate, the grand entry. So if you're going to participate in powwows or community gatherings and you're seeing that ceremony, people are coming in from the Eastern Door. It's welcoming the time, the day, the people, the little ones. And we dance, for the most part, in a clockwise formation. And that is how we gather to our little ones, our adults, our elders, until we reach each other in the center, in the hub, where all the people will come together. In this time, as we prepare, we also look forward to of course, June 21st, the longest day of the year. As we prepare for that, we're also preparing for how we're going to engage with one another, how we're going to look at what it is that we have to bring forward as part of our ceremonial, as part of the distribution of our collections from the spring, as part of whatever it may be for that First Nation, Inuit, or Métis gathering. These are all significant in being able to welcome the themes that we're also looking at. And we've equated these in our webinar series to looking at what are the Western alignment of the Western approaches that are necessary as part of your involvement and your engagement as in your work. So we look forward to how you will do this. When we looked at doing to one of the winter sessions, and that was quite difficult for us to try to manipulate at the time, it was a time of fight or flight. And it's looking at how to really deal with the challenges that you're faced with. Don't look at them as obstacles and barriers, but they're challenges as part of learning, a learning step in your long life journey of learning. So we welcome you at this spring door to the engagement of today. Miigwech. Back to you, Heather.
Of discussion. Sorry, I went on mute there for a second. We're going to start with our first area of discussion. So it's really discussion. Question one is about, let's get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So we're going to explore how we can seek instances of discomfort and engage. What have been good experiences of engagement? How can we seek instances of discomfort and engage? How can we evolve with these perspectives? So as we discuss these questions, I really ask all of you to share your thoughts and ask questions. Like I said, now is the time. This is a safe environment to do so. So Kimberly, when we were planning our webinar, you shared with us your love for running and how you're not a fan of hill running though. So I'd like to invite you to share this story with everyone because we felt it was such a great story about giving that image to us as we think about this webinar today, so we can build on that. So I will pass it to you, Kimberly.
Sure. Thanks, Heather. Yeah, well, when we were starting to talk about how do we move into a place of discomfort, what was going on for me at the time was I was trying something new. And so I do love running. I'm not always as consistent as I'd like to be, but I've been doing it for a number of years and I really enjoy it. And I feel, like for the most part, I'm pretty good. But I hate hills. I've always hated hills. And so I just never did them. I would walk the hills or look for fairly flat areas to run, just avoid the whole thing. And so I was telling a friend of mine about this and he thought that was so interesting. He said, hills are so good for you. Use all kinds of different muscles and, it helps improve your running in lots of different ways. Maybe just try it. And I think there was something about the supportive way in which he said it. And, this sense that there was no judgment sort of attached to that advice. It was just a possibility. And so I started running hills and I note, I was paying attention to what's happening to me when I'm doing this. And it's really challenging and it's hard. There's different, muscles involved. But as I got going, I realized it wasn't actually as hard as I thought. And, it was about being less self-conscious also, I think, because it probably wasn't very pretty at the beginning. I probably looked pretty tired when I got to the top of the hill. But, the idea was that each time I tried, it got a little easier. And on reflection, I was able to adjust, lots of things about my style and my approach that helped me improve every time. And now I actually look for hills to run. I'm enjoying it, and I'm more comfortable with the fact that I don't have to be good at every element of something to enjoy it. And so I had shared that with the team, in the spirit of thinking about moving into spaces that are hard and that we're not comfortable with, and where we might, you know, look like we're struggling. And that, that's okay, that in the end, with a good intention, what it means is that we can get better all around, at something. And so that was kind of the personal thing that I was going through at the time of the planning of the webinar, which I, had sort of shared as a metaphor. And so maybe that's where we can jump off on this discussion around, meeting people where they're at and not being, really great at something in the beginning, but that's okay. There's some place you have to start.
So true. For me, when I think about hill running, it scares me. Well, that's because I have breathing problems and I'd probably be in bad shape. But then I was thinking about this more after our discussion, and as a patient within the healthcare system, I was terrified, either as a patient in direct care, to raise my voice and be engaged, or even as a patient partner, be involved. What would I know? I'm just a patient. Then I realized that I have that lived experience expertise that no one else has. And as we've seen with our journey about with it, engaging with patients and families, that we've had to readjust how we're doing things and really find ways to work together to find creative things so we can work, make improvements together. And I think that's as well with our Indigenous peoples, because there's systemic fear that's already there. So how do you alleviate that fear? And I'm wondering if that's something that we could maybe talk about a bit, is that systemic fear. When I thought about vaccinations, I was like, well, why wouldn't everybody get vaccinations? But then, I learned that many Indigenous people were used for experiments, and that's caused a lot of more harm than good. So fear for the healthcare system. So if we're going to engage in healthcare systems with patients and families, Indigenous peoples are patients and families as well, but how can we create that environment so they feel safe? So I'm wondering if anyone could reflect on that. Kimberly. And thinking about the hill running, because it's about working together. Like you had that friend really push you to go there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think like going back to that point, I think it is, about the type of support that you have around you, how safe people feel, talking about the struggles and challenges that they're experiencing. And when the right time is, to raise these questions or to talk about the challenges. I think, one of the things that as an Indigenous person that I rely on heavily is deep relationship, finding those people or maybe other partners or other organizations where you've had success in relationship before. And to rely on those people and organizations for support when you move into that space. I think it's fine to look at other examples where things are happening. And in fact, in the registration questions, you see that a lot of organizations have strategies, but it's how do individuals in those organizations who have a lot of experience and are really good at what they do, how do they get comfortable moving into a space that is, um, you know, unpredictable or challenging for them. And so, I would say um, a good place to start is building relationships where you can get feedback and where you can start to move into places of discomfort where you have the support around you to be able to challenge a little bit.
Yeah, and it is a journey that doesn't happen overnight. And that's, when I think about people-centered care is about relationship building. And it's about, meeting people in the communities, and it's shifting conversations from what's the matter with you to what matters to you, because that's so, so important. Um, I think our healthcare systems as well don't like change, and we're asking for lots of changes lately. And that's very, very important, because the most underutilized voice in healthcare are those that are the recipients of care. And it's time to ensure that all voices are being heard. Marilee, do you have anything to add?
Actually, while I'm thinking about it and trying to address person-centered care and the image of the hill challenge, a lot of people are struggling with the idea of what is what is the idea, what is the image or the concept that I'm trying to capture here in that analogy. And what we're trying to focus on here is that you have all that for the people whom are working within these organizations, you have a heavy load of information, regulatory, legislative, parcels, boxes, trunks, whatever it may be. And you must utilize those as you're trying to obtain services, treatments, discharge plans, so on and so forth with your clients. The clients themselves are also faced with very heavy luggage that they must try to also bring up that hill in regards to looking at family structures, their home environment, the environment around them, and whether or not it's a safe space. Am I going to be okay? And with all of those uncertainties, you have a level of hesitancy in people wanting to accept those challenges and learning steps that are ahead of them, in being able to expand outside of the box of what is comfortable, and being able to identify what is uncomfortable and to even bring that forward in the conversation is tricky in both sides of the conversation. For the healthcare provider, whom can sense that this person is wanting to address something, and for the patient, whom is saying, I wish I knew the words to tell you this. I don't know how to tell you this. Am I going to get in trouble if I tell you this? And with all of those types of things, it's looking for that, where's that comfortable space for you to meet me at? So without looking at what is that checklist, it's a matter of looking at that person, clearing the space to having a safe space, an environment free of judgment, free of those barriers or those conditions that might have you, thinking otherwise, that, you know, I shouldn't be part of this conversation. I shouldn't be involved, so on and so forth. I'm looking at a question in the chat box here at the same time, and it relates to this idea in addressing that discomfort, and whether or not it's looking at recommending that hospitals should they provide sweat lodges for Indigenous patients. And it's a regional issue because it has to look at many factors. My teachings are from a long standing health society. For many years that had to go underground, couldn't be talked of. We couldn't even identify who we were. But now that it has come to the light, to the surface in these very unique times, we have to then look at the regional experience of what it is that is comfortable for that patient. Not all hospital facilities are in a place where they can meet those conditions for maybe municipality zoning restrictions, whatever it may be. You know how you've got to walk so many blocks to just have a cigarette if you're you're visiting some of the hospitals. So those types of environments need to be considered. But at the same time, it's a matter of those hospitals which have been champions in being able to provide this opportunity for the Indigenous population as part of a healing right, because it is something that has not been part of the hospital scene, the environment, for many decades. Remember that for those who have participated in the webinars from the beginning, we talked about our participation in the Canadian society has only really occurred since the 1970s. So the idea of having a sweat lodge has some, makes your hair stand up. Well, I don't know if I want to get into that, so on and so forth. But there's also, why do you want to do it? And do you know how to do it properly? Following the protocols, looking at the traditional approaches. For many of you, you have become comfortable, and thank you for providing a tobacco offering when inviting an Indigenous person into your meeting, to your circle, to your presentations. But do you know that there is a process that is required before you accept the responsibility of transferring tobacco? And there is also a responsibility for you after you've presented that tobacco. So the same idea follows with sweat lodges. And sweat lodges are male or female. If they are combined, whom is the elder that is presiding over the convocation of these sweat lodges? Whom are the fire keepers? Where are the rocks coming from? And there's so many other details that need to be identified, which then brings us back to who's going to carry those rocks up our hill? Who's going to go and look after making sure that, is this a women's lodge? Is this a men's lodge? What time of the season are we in? Who are the people of this territory where this lodge is being held on this ground? Who picked it? And there are all of those considerations, like we do within our workplace, bringing forward documents, directives, legislation, and so on and so forth, policies that allow us to address the activities or the actions that allow us to engage. Thanks.
That's so true, Mary Lee. And if we're going to build authentic relationships with people, we have to get to know them first and what's all involved. And by creating that safe space for them to be able to come into. And so we've done tremendous work for patients and families, but are we doing our due diligence to ensure that our First Nations, Inuit, Métis people are being respected as well? So that would draw me into our discussion number 2 question, which is really about, don't just go through those motions, take responsibility. So, how do you understand the whys of the roles and responsibilities that accompany practicing in a culturally safe and humble environment? So Mary Lee, can I pass it to you again for some thoughts on that?
Thanks so much for that, Heather. So let me go back to something that I might sound like a broken record on, but that's okay. Rote method has never hurt anyone. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action looks at health, numbers 18 to 24. I'm not going to say what they are for you, but I'm going to let you know that there's 7 of them. And coincidentally, there are also 7 grandfather teachings. Is that coincidence? Is that divine intervention? It is important for the reconciliation process to occur. But once again, let me remind you, I have nothing to reconcile. As an Indigenous person, I am sitting here at the table with my non-Indigenous partners, allies, stakeholders, to ensuring that you're following the protocols, the values of respect, the 7 teachings, and many other traditional approaches that are necessary for your authentic engagement with our Indigenous people, our leadership, our governance structure, so on and so forth. We are now looking at a situation that allows us to do this engagement without fear, without judgment, we hope. What we also need to consider is that in some of the 94 calls to action that come from the TRC, that there are other areas that are necessary for health organizations or other partner organizations to become aware of. Let me point out a few of them for you. Number 7, addressing the employment and education gaps. Number 10, looking at education specifically. There are seven subcomponents within it, which allow for community engagement, language revitalization, and community to be able to address the curriculum that is going to be provided in our schools. Numbers 57, which looks at the training and skills development of our public service employees, like yourself, and I appreciate this effort. Number 62 and 63, which looks at restorative justice, looks at issues from the Council of Ministers of Education to addressing and modifying the current curriculum in any post-secondary institution and in our elementary and secondary level, to be also paying the proper attention to the curriculum that is required at those young ages. So let me just tell you, in regards to that, it's also concerning and probably eye-opening for a lot of you. In a lot of our First Nation communities across the country, there are 637. We do not all have a secondary level institution. So therefore, a lot of our young people at very impressionable times in their lives, 13, 14 years old, must leave their home to finish their secondary school requirements. Sound familiar? So you're taking them away for us for 4 years. So then they like school. They like the idea that they're going to select a profession. They may want to become a nurse, a doctor, a brain surgeon, an astronaut. They're going to have to go away for school again because we have no universities and colleges on our communities either. So we lose them for almost 8, 9, maybe additional years. And then we expect them to come home and work with us. The challenges, running up that hill. That's another clear example of why we need to look at setting that pathway. As Kimberly and I have said in previous discussions, we may never see what the results of this work is that we're going to develop, but at least we will know that we have done our part in laying the rocks, laying the path, laying the direction ahead for the generations that have yet to come. When you're looking at being uncomfortable, this is part of your discomfort. Take responsibility. Learn how to learn that exercise of humility. It's hard. It's a hard one to do. And I appreciate those whom have done it. And I look forward to working with you. Thanks, Heather Lee. Heather Kimberly.
Kimberly, do you have anything to add here or thoughts?
No, I really appreciate Marilee's reference to the commitment and the amount of time that this is going to take, and that it's not just, something that one or even a few of us can address. That, I completely believe that the reconciliation piece has to happen on an individual level through relationship first. We have to let it seep into, all of the organizations that we work in, and we have to find supportive ways in this system to address this. When Marilee and I have been involved in different elements of that work over the last year, and we will continue to be involved because we have a huge commitment to changing this. And then just to go, back to that metaphor of the hill, like it's not just one hill, right? It's an ongoing practice. It's an ongoing and regular reflection on, your own sort of approach to these things. Why, I saw a question in the Q&A, which talks about, I want to know if this phrase is acceptable, indigenizing our policies and practices. And it's a good question, and I'm glad that it came up. I think, the fact that you're asking the question is a sign, right? If you're uncomfortable, if you're not sure, what is it that's creating that discomfort? And, in a lot of cases, when we reflect on these questions that come up for us, the answer is there. And I think it's worth discussion, with colleagues and friends, if you can approach it from a place of curiosity, often that opens the door to change. And I guess, from there to continue to build relationships and share the experience of like asking the question, beginning the conversation, not just, keep that learning to yourself, but then be willing to share what it was like for you and encourage others to take those first steps. And then, continue to bring others along with you. I think that's one of the things that we talked a lot about, is that this, it becomes part of a practice and a commitment to a practice, as opposed to just one effort, one time, and um, deciding that that was enough. So I just think that's really important, that commitment.
Well, and if healthcare organizations think about like, when I think about the practice of engaging with patients and families, like it's been about 13 years since I first got involved. And it's been, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet about really authentically engaging with those, who are users of the health system. But it's finding that, how are you creating your guiding principles for the organization? So are you including, finding ways with our Indigenous peoples as well to ensure that they feel safe, that it's culturally acceptable, and building those into those guiding principles. So then, everyone can feel safe and participate. Because
If I could then, Heather,
Yes.
one of the things that, I also want to make sure that we're recognizing here, especially in the calls to action number 57,
Mhm.
the other portion that a lot of the registrants or a lot of the people participating in this webinar need to be aware of is that Indigenous people also have a very complex structure in governance, our politics. When I think of the Haudenosaunee people, and I'm thinking about the Longhouse and the clan system, when I think of the, the Montagnais in Quebec, when I'm thinking of the Innu, the Inuit, the very, very complex structures, which brought us to where we're at today. But when I also think of it, you also have to really be able to create that that essence or command and attention to, just because you did, one cultural safety course, you went to a powwow, you did the blanket exercise, you did something once, does not grant you that privilege for your entire existence. It is a annual, it is a daily, it is a continual practice as we move forward in our journey here on Mother Earth. As we do that, both Kimberly and I have to follow an Indigenous structure. We have to follow the protocols. We have to follow the Western approaches, the regulations, the legislation, agendas, meetings, minutes, records of decisions, directives, authorities, and it goes on and on and on. But at the same time, we're respectful of both of those practices and why they are required. But we need to find the time in the capacity that, especially that we're in right now, to re-energize ourselves, to go back and find the strength that we need so that we can become engaged once again as the activities go forward in our time. As we do that, we also have to recognize that there is another document that is also important that we as Indigenous people also need to recognize when we're preparing statements or policy positions or other documents that are necessary for professional engagement, is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP, is what most people want to refer to it as. And with that document, there are 45 articles within inside of that. As Indigenous structures, we must identify what is that first UNDRIP article that is the foundation, and then build on it to the TRC structure. What is that item? And then we have to relay it if there are any band council or our regional tribal authority motions or documents, and then we have to relate that back to a meet. So there's all of this work that needs to happen. But the one thing that we're finding, especially at this given time, is the deficiencies of policies to allow us to drive some of these actions. So we're now starting to identify the policies which will become part of regulatory or legislative practice. For instance, as we're looking towards discussions on the racism strategy, as we're looking for the discussions in regards to distinctions-based legislation, as we look into the discussions on health transformation, just what exactly are those and what do they mean and who is controlling who here? These are part of the frameworks that we are now being heavily involved in. And I'm grateful for virtual technology some of the time, especially when it works. But for the most of the time, it's a matter of getting to the people. You have no idea how, when we get together as Indigenous people, when you get up for sunrise ceremony, you have to be there, not when the sun has risen, before the sun is risen, and be prepared and have your fires lit and have your berries done and have your water there and the people are placed. And then when the sunrise ceremony happens and you go through that process and then you continue on with your day. Now, most Indigenous people who practice traditional exercise every day like that, we go out in the mornings and thank that, we've woken up and you've given us these gifts and you've given us all these things and you've given us all of these favors. And those become the practice of honoring what it is that we have. So when people are coming online to these types of engagements and these types of webinars, and we're saying, do land acknowledgement. And I'm very, very impressed by one of the people on this call whom went into I think her name is Francesca. She went into where she's at, where's the Métis settlement. She's got a First Nation settlement. She gave the treaty recognition. Absolutely impressive. And that just tells me that you are embracing the environment that you're within, that you're looking at what it is you're grateful for. When somebody else had pointed out in the chat about equity and equity of services, you're acknowledging my land. And I'm glad that you're enjoying your time here and that you can play and that you can live and you work and you have your family. And then somebody says, well, it's not right. Why did you guys get put out way over there? How come you still have boil water advisories? Why are you still so challenged to getting services in your area? And those become part of the discussion in regards to how to address health transformation, how to address the challenges and the barriers that we as Indigenous people face today. And how do we work with a Western approach and a traditional approach in our healing practices? How do you make sure that, I was in a call earlier and somebody wanted to getting something done as far as a traditional practice or a community type ceremony. I said, well, you got to stop. That's only good for Alberta. You can't take an Alberta practice and try to emanate that into Mi'kmaq territory for the Union and Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq people or the Maliseet people. It just that you can't take those. You find the strength from where you're at and you take those environments, and that's how you build that discussion to the next phase. Thanks a lot, Heather. Thanks, Kimberly.
No, thank you, Kimberly and Mary Lee. I'm going to throw us into our last part of discussion. It's really about, and such an amazing conversation. I can't thank you enough. Like, I'm learning so much as we go, and this is what I love about these conversations. But let's talk about meeting people where they're at. So who can we plan some of your next engagement opportunities to be more culturally safe and humble? So how can we do that? So let's fill this chat box and let's think of some ideas. And, you know, as I was thinking about this, I'm here in Saskatchewan. I'm on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis here in Saskatoon. And I do a lot of work with the Saskatchewan Health Authority, and I co-chair our Patient Family Leadership Council. And I'm very honored to do that because right from day one, we decided that we had to be different and we wanted to bring in the culture, Indigenous culture, into how we meet. So we start with an elder opening. We have talking circles, and it's really changed the way that we conduct our meetings. And when we segued to a virtual world, we still found a way to do a virtual talking circle. And it's been phenomenal because we have a circle on the screen and all our pictures are there, and the rock actually goes around the room, and we can still engage and participate. So I just thought I'd open with that because it's really taught me a lot. You know, like we could have stuck with, you know, the structures we're used to. But, you know, if we're really going to commit to change, we have to start exploring some new ways of doing things. And that's the journey I'm on. And that's why I really am proud of the work that we've done. And I know our accreditation cycle is really following that as well, by following the seasons of life. So we're following our accreditation is circular. So, you know, and it's about working with our Indigenous leaders in the province and working together. So any thoughts on, you know, some ideas or thoughts for everyone here on how we can start working together, meeting people where we're at?
I can jump in there and just say, I think, you know, that's a good example, Heather, and just thinking about, you know, some of the questions that are popping up in the chat and some of the earlier references to policy guidance and, you know, some of the frameworks that are out there. Those things are all important. I think what you're describing, though, is sort of an organizational culture or a shift, right, in the way that people come together. And for us, like we reference that as a way of being, you know, it's not necessarily something that shows up in a measurement or, you know, that you can plan for, but it is this commitment to being together in a respectful way. And that means like making space for ideas that are different from yours, making room for people to come as, you know, the whole person. So, you know, for Indigenous people, that means many different things, you know, and Mary Lee has talked about some of that. But I think, you know, if those ways of coming and being together are dismissed, you know, we feel that, and there's no need for it to be overt. You know, when you're not sort of accepted or your ideas are being discarded before they're even fully spoken. And so it is really about, you know, in embracing a way of being together and committing to that, and you know, changing the culture in the organizations that support the implementation of those policies, that, you know, support those frameworks and demonstrate other measures that mean better health outcomes for our Indigenous people and Indigenous Canadians.
And thinking about that hill, you may have to help somebody get up that hill. And by sharing, you know, your thoughts or working together or taking time to rest and know that you can't do this. Like, this is never done overnight. And if it's done overnight, it's not going to be done well. And that it will be a journey, but you'll have to take time to even celebrate the small steps too, and do it together. Mary Lee.
So I just want to go to one of the questions in the chat, and somebody's asking a question in regards to going to a community, and that there is a culture center there, and how do they approach, how do they engage, how do you become an active person within that community? First of all, I would urge you to look at what is the leadership within that community. Is it chief and council? Is there, or if it's in a rural area, or do you have a friendship center nearby? And if it's a remote or an isolated community and you're coming in as a visitor to that territory, can you forego some luggage? Can you pay the extra $35 or $40 and put on another, 35, 50-pound bag on your luggage and bring up things like fruit, milk, diapers, baby formula, those types of things. Drop them off to the band office, to the health center, to the clinic, to somewhere where the community people at their own will can go and accept your contribution as part of your being a guest in their area for a while. It's a tricky step to be involved in, especially since you have to also take a little bit of a litmus test. Is this your first time there? Are you a repeat visitor? How long will you be there? What are your intentions? Are you taking something away from there? If you're taking something away, whether that is, a non-tangible item, research, what are you leaving behind? Will you come back? Those are all questions that the people ask, because when you sit in some of these homes, we watch the planes land on the lakes and stuff like that. We just kind of sit there like, okay, so what's this person doing here now? And you look at some of the other people when they're coming up to, especially to NWT Yukon Nunavut territory, and they come up with their bags and whatever. What did you bring for the people? What did you bring for the children? What did you bring to say thank you for allowing me into your space while I'm here? So it's that type of recognition. It's a matter of what your environment is, what your region is. If you're unsure, contact your home organization via this webinar to being able to look at what are some of the next steps and what you can expect, or how you should engage and how you should recognize your involvement. Because the last thing, of course, you want to do is get kicked out of there or be totally ignored when you're there. Thanks.
Well, Marilee and Kimberly, we've had an amazing hour. It goes way too fast. So honored to be part of this discussion with you. And, I think we've only just begun, and there's so much more to talk about. I just do want to offer some final thoughts for you if you have a few thoughts you want to share, because I think you would say it best. So I will leave it to you, Marilee and Kimberly, to share final thoughts.
You want me to go? Well, I just would say, as always, it's been a fantastic discussion and really, stimulates lots of different ideas for me. I love the engagement in the chat and the questions that are coming up, and I really appreciate everybody for being here and for engaging and listening. I think, final thoughts are really around just being a little bit brave, trying things that are challenging and being prepared for things to not go the way that you expected. But being committed to then trying again, I saw in the chat a lot of references to humility and to being humble. And, if we can all start from that place, the gifts are tremendous. And so really to think about how to do that in your work and in your life, I think are important places to start each day.
And Marilee, and also I do not want you to end without closing our circle. I also want to remind people about June 21st being National Indigenous Peoples Day, and to partake in activities and get involved and ask questions. So Marilee, I will pass it to you.
Actually, I think I'd like to turn it over to Brenda to have some closing remarks, and then I will close the circle. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Marilee. So it's my privilege to acknowledge and thank Heather, our moderator, and speakers today, Kimberly and Marilee, for your time today and your commitment to the improvement of health service delivery for everyone. And for challenging all of us to take a few steps up that hill and go into those places of discomfort, which is what we need to do to learn and truly understand. And perhaps by doing so, we'll learn to seek those hills, as Kimberly does now when you're running. Thank you as well to Sasha, Madeline, and Danica from the Health Standards Organization for your collaboration and energy in bringing these webinars to life. So on behalf of the college team, that includes Roshni and Amy, who lead the magic that brings these webinars to life, thank you all. Thank you. And I'm full of gratitude.
Okay, Marilee, can you close our circle now?
Thank you very much. So in as part of the closure of the circle, I want to congratulate all of you for those of you whom have participated in each of the webinars. I hope that it was helpful for you. I will not say goodbye. We don't say goodbye. I will say I'll see you soon. I'll see you later. I'll see you next time. Goodbye is final. And this is not over. I want to thank HSO and CCHL for hosting these webinars and providing us the opportunity to engage with our partners from coast to coast to coast. With that, miigwech. I'd like to close now. Thank you to the ancestors and to the elders and to the people who have brought us here today. Please watch over our community people, and please watch all over for all of those who work with our people, and protect everyone. Protect them from hurt. Look after the little ones. Protect those who don't have a voice, and protect those who are on their way to us. On behalf of my relations, Jimmy Wedge. Thank you again, everyone. Enjoy your day. I appreciate this time.
Thank you, Marilee, and thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you again soon.
Take care.